In this lesson, I'm going to show you how to use this Lens Corrections tab. I'm using Photoshop 5.arw, the practice file, if you want to follow along. So if you go to this tab, you'll have two options down here, Profile or Manual. Under Profile, you get sort of an automated way to fix a lens, quote unquote fix. Because what it's doing is it's going to try to remove any warp and vignetting that might come naturally from the lens you use. Typically, if you're using a wider lens, then you'll have more of a warp around the edges, which we were using for this photo right here, the Sony 16-35, all the way on 16 millimeters, so it was very wide on the full frame camera. So first, if we check Enable Profile Corrections, look what happens. This is the before and then the after. It becomes a little bit brighter around the edges, and then it feels a little bit like it might be warped, but what's happening is it's actually unwarping it to make everything look a little bit more natural, as if you were actually there. You'll notice that Photoshop already knows what camera, what model lens, and what profile we were using, and this is all automated and it's built into the metadata of this camera. If you don't have a smart camera, if you're using a manual camera or an old camera or a lens that doesn't match with the camera itself, in terms of manual camera, I meant like an old lens or something, you might not have this information. So you can go in and actually find the specific lens and model that you are using, and it will adjust it accordingly. You can also manually adjust a little bit more or less with this distortion and vignetting option. So dragging the vignetting left to right will increase or decrease the sort of vignette fix that it has applied. Say you want to get rid of the distortion, but you still like the vignette, we can add back the vignette that the lens naturally has. The distortion, on the other hand, will again bring you back to how it was shot, to how it was fixed in the middle. Or if you drag to the right, it will sort of flatten it out as even more. So you can adjust this to your liking. Now, these corrections are only if you don't like the look of your lens. If you like the look of your lens, then there's no real reason to adjust these things. Now, what about chromatic aberration? I don't know if we'll be able to see it in this image, but sometimes, depending on the setting and situation, you can kind of see it right here. You'll get these sort of purple and green lines on the edges of things. Checking on Remove Chromatic Aberration will get rid of those lines and make it more of the natural color, which you can see here if I turn it on and off. It makes this line more blue, which is probably what it more naturally look like. This photo has a lot of blue. I'm not seeing really much green or purple. Let's see if we turn this off. So this is a good example of a lens and a camera that doesn't shoot with a lot of chromatic aberration. But I just wanted to point that out. If you are in a setting where you are looking at your camera and you see like some weird purple hazy lines on the edges of things, or green, that's what chromatic aberration is. And by checking this on or off, you can sort of remove that. Now, the manual tab right here basically allows us to do what is done here on our own. So let me go down here, say fit to view, so we can see our whole image, which is important when doing these types of corrections. And so here we can basically do whatever we want. We can make it bulge, which actually gives it, an interesting effect if you want that, or stretch it the opposite way. If you do stretch it like this, you'll want to go in and crop so that you don't see these edges. And if you see this sort of grid behind your photo, that means the background is going to be transparent. So you don't want to see that when you're saving your file. So you would want to crop in if you do that sort of distortion. And then same with the defringe. If you have a specific color, so let's zoom in here really quick. So this has that sort of purple fringe on this line. This is the chromatic aberration that if we increase the purple amount and then adjust sort of the hue angle, you can choose more or less, it will get rid of that. So see if I go to before, after, see how it got rid of that sort of purple line? This allows you to pinpoint either a specific green or purple to get rid of in terms of the fringing, which is what that chromatic aberration is. Let's zoom out one more time. And lastly, you have vignetting. So this is sort of a way to decrease the vignette and then also choose a midpoint which is happening for the entire image itself. It's not like this effects that we added before, which is a post-crop vignetting. This is just fixing the entire image when you're zoomed out and uncropped, doing what is happening here in the profile, but in a manual way. Cool, so this is the lens corrections tab, another sort of advanced feature. It's not one I necessarily play around with too much because typically I like the way my lenses look. Sometimes when I shoot on a very wide lens though, you do get some of that distortion around the edges that I don't like, and using this enable profile corrections button tends to help with that. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, we'll see you in another lesson.